This speech is about the stories, the backgrounds, and some outcomes that are coming out from a player-centric framework that I developed over the years, since 2012. And it was, I was actually here when I started to think about that. And the way it was applied and misapplied by game designers. And I would like to start telling you that I tricked you with the title, because it's not going to experience how game designers are divers, but how they are diggers. Because it makes more sense if we think about how they failed, they succeeded in doing things, and they had to go deeper and deeper into the understanding of the player in order to grasp some meaning of what the hell was going on when players do play. So, one of the things that I love to ask myself, and that my students do hate me to ask them, is, does it work? Does it make any sense? And they used to like roll up the eyes and say, let's figure it out. Okay, that's the situation wherein everything started, and I'm in the School of Design of Politecnico di Milano, and from 2012 to 2016, so the last year, I've been able to go through about 100 games designed by 500 game designers as my students, and thesis students, and you can see different courses, workshops. Someone ran with Judith Ackerman that just left from here, so yeah. And well, the aim of the games that we were developing and that I contributed to develop with my students were to use games as communication system. So games meant to transfer meanings, to convey something, like messages and things. And to do that, we had to get along with some limits, like the fact that when you have a narrative, it helps to convey meanings and to transfer something, or the fact that players are really interactive, that they cannot be passive in no way, and the fact that they interact with a game is not the only issue, because they also interact with the meanings that are somehow put into the game in very creative ways. And then the fact that when you design games that are not meant to stay in the digital sphere, you got to take care of social interactions. Also the one that players don't want to have. So, most of the time, I preferred to just get on the field. I mean, most of the games I designed are location-based mobile games with my students, because I prefer them to go outside and do silly things and experience the things for real. So I ask them to take a step back from board games and from digital games and to discover again the magic of interaction with people. So stop looking at the phone. 500 students has been involved in this research over the years, and if we count them as in a total, because some of them come back again, so, but I don't know how many of them are the same. So let's say 500, even if I guess it's 450 something. I don't know, they get attached to me. And they have been investigated in two different ways. On the one side as game designers, because they were in groups designing games, and on the other side as players, because they were the ones playing the other games on their turn. But just to make it super comprehensible, let's go through an example. When I was telling you using the space in a creative way and do things that you maybe don't want to do, I was speaking of that. Namely, to put yourself to the test and do crazy stuff. This is an example of location-based mobile game, and it's called Keep Safe, keep the date safe. And it's a location-based mobile game that is meant to trigger reflection about the consequences of having unsafe sex in university. So, how does it work? It's grounded on metaphors. The entire narrative of the game is based on metaphors, And because that's the only way to get to the players without making them raise some psychological barriers. If you're familiar with the studies of Mary Flanagan and Jeff Kaufman, for example, it's better not to scare your players before you start playing. So let's keep some part of the topic a little hidden, and then we will go through that without being biased. So, being that game happening in the space, it is largely based on also the performative aspects of play. That is recollecting the capital culture of playing in public space. That is someone that we are getting back to be used to, thanks also to Pokemon Go and Ingress and these kind of things. But for a while, we were not anymore used to do that. However, just going back to the case study, the mechanics of the game were meant to start transferring the contents. So they decided to say, okay, I'm sorry for the topic. The other one were not so lovely, like depression, suicide, and things. At least sexual things are nicer. Yeah, I guess I have a problem with topics. However, they took all the systems to avoid contraception systems, and they decided to put them into a dice and say, okay, that's the main mechanic. When players are going around, they are using a dice. Okay, but this die is telling you just that thing. Sorry, I should say that thing. I have another monitor here with the same things of yours. But they are, that's the most common way of having sex, to avoid having kids. But that's not the point. Avoid having kids, it's not the only situation you have to take care of when you are a teen or a little more. You should avoid diseases too. So what they did, they decided to add overdices with the pro and cons, and according to the color of the one of the first dice, you have to throw the second one, and according to the result, if you have a cons, you have to throw another dice, because bad things are going to happen to you. And the fact was that you were in the public space, and the dice were like that, and you were moving around, and then when something bad was happening to you, you got stickers. Like a kid here, venereal disease here, and you were going around with stickers and things. All this was driven by a smartphone acting as a storyteller to keep you engaged. Please remember, keep you engaged. That's the aim of a designer. We will get back to that quite soon and painfully. So the smartphone is like storyteller, and it's like driving you as a player in the shoes of a party boy and party girl having good time at university. So, party, 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 especially in the Italian mood of doing that. So there is a calendar, and you're driven through that. Some things are happening, and every step of the year, academic year, has a specific party moment, like celebration of a new year, or celebration because the semester has ended, or whatever you can think about that. And they were into the public space of the university. Okay, you can say you are a design university, yes, but at that period of the time there was also architecture into the campus and engineering guys. And they were looking at our players doing that. Okay? So they started to say, what the hell are you doing? And we just answered, we are making exams. Oh, that's how designers do study? Said, haha, let's wait here and you will see what will happen in a half an hour. You will see their faces changing color after color, because that's the first time when they will see if the work they designed for the last 4 months is going to work or not. So let's hope that players are having fun, because it means that the designer is going to have a good day. If players are getting into troubles, you will see the face of the designer getting darker and darker and change all the colors on it. However, going back to the game design of this, which is the narrative metaphor of this mini game that is similar to Twister. Intercourse, yeah. And this one, I guess it's quite explicit, but however, it could have a subtitle like use condom properly. They can break. And we had players going around with that, and with smaller dices, and playing things. Okay, that's the field in which the Crazy Me is. And I think the only way to describe that is lively and vibrant. Why? Because when I ask my students to design these games, I'm actually asking them to design these games as some of these elements. I mean, the field is for sure interdisciplinary, but also the ways of looking at games is quite messy and crowded. And well, that's my crowded perspective, and that's my starting point also to analyze what happens. In particular, I think you do agree if I say that we have these 4 elements participating to every game, like the player, the designer, the researcher in the moment in which we are taking care of discovering if things are working, and the spectator, at least in this game. And I can say that my work analyzed the 3 on the top and left kind of out the last on the bottom, because I just decided not to care about the spectators, because it was too much for me also to take care about that. But I spent 4 years following designers and their dumb players playing their games time over time and looking at what was happening. Now, they are not common games. Just to make a little reminder, they are games about social issues, social messages, and they belong to the field that is named Games for Social Change. Okay, for social change. It means that they want to change something. So this should start making you ring the first bell in your head, and is, if a game is called for social change, it means that something has changed from a time 0 to a time 1. And that's the problem. You have to measure something at time 0 and see if something has changed at time 1. According to what? To the game as an experience. And now, the experience that happens to player, but again, what the hell is an experience? If we go back to, I'm Italian, and the Latin-based is into our language, so I love to go back to the root of the words, and experience means shortly, going through something and possibly also having pain in doing that. Because when you have an experience, you have like kind of a scarf on you, and you cannot go back to the way you were before that experience, because now I see it. It's like if I show you the white pictures with some black spots, and then I tell you, that's a dalmata. Okay, you will see the dalmata now. You cannot avoid seeing it. And that's the same with experiences. But the real problem is that if, again, we are talking about games for social change, the real question you have to pose yourself is, are the messages conveyed? Which ones? And the subtitle here, is it the right one? And then how did players receive them? Do they got it? Is it fine? Is it understandable? Or to what extent they got it? And here it comes the huge error, thinking that everything is going to be fine. No way. Are you familiar with that? It's a Game for Change, the festival that happens in New York. And I was there in 2015 and 16, and something has to be said. These games, again, are for social change, and they want to communicate something, and the aim is to change someone by play, through gameplay also. Well, so the topic is to empower players to gain an experiential understanding of something. Of course, hopefully for the better, not for the worst. how dealing with some topic and having a clear objective in mind. So this is some of the example of games that I guess you know or you're familiar with. And they are all based on this kind of structure that is a communication structure where one message is sent through the game designer to the player. But in doing that, we have two complex moments that are the moments of interpretation and translation. The first one is the game designer's act of translating a message in order to put it into the game. The second one is the ones of a player who is playing the game and make the reverse engineering of a message that has been put into the game by someone else. So, two levels of complexity, actually. And that's the moment where errors happen. Because if we see it with a bigger bubble, that's what the designer thinks and wants to put into a game. Let's call this bubble hope, because it makes the idea. The smaller one is what he is really able to put into the game according to his idea. Then another smaller part is what is actually into the game. And then there is the little bubble, what is grasped by the player. And then again, the player, it doesn't exist a medium player. Every player is different. Every player is grasping a little different according to the way the player has grown up. Social, cultural backgrounds and things like that. So what happens in this case is the designer, as a designer, is not supposed to have this social background, sociological background, or anthropological background in order to discover if things are really and actually working. But who is able, they should have at least some ways of doing that. Again, at this Games for Social Change in 2015, at the festival, it emerged quite an issue, like we should take care of providing or defining at least some guidelines in order to see if these games that are called for change are really changing someone, something, and how. And it was one of the first times when the real issue arose and was posed to an entire community. And I was there saying, yes, that's the topic I'm already dealing with since 3 years. For the first time, I'm in the right place in the right moment, and I have something good to say. And this is the result of what I have to say. Players do have their knowledge. The problem is that, again, it's encrypted. You have to access it. How and in which way? And how can the designer get it? I mean, what did the player think? Which is the way he experienced the situation? How can a game designer do this kind of mind work? I cannot really go to each player and ask, did you like the game? Because he's going to lie to me. Because, of course, I'm already spoiling the answer by asking, do you like the game? Of course you liked. Okay, so we got to be a little subtle and ask designers to make a little step further, like taking care of the players and their experiences by becoming something like a methodological bricoleur, that is like art and attack things, and use some tools that, of course, are borrowed by some other field of work. I asked my students over the years to use these three methodologies: ethnography, participant observation, and survey. And since I'm a very good person sometimes, I decided to make them models and to ask them to test my own models in order to see if things are going fine. And I made some questionnaires in order to measure the situation before and after. So questionnaires that you have to provide before players are starting to play and after the game experience. Rapid ethnography models that has to be used during the play experience in order to facilitate the work of a designer of looking at how players are playing, and then interviews and focus groups with some example of questions, like avoid asking your player, did you like it? Because did you like, he's going to, of course, say something wrong, to lie to you. So I am just telling, the entire process of designing these tools has been a recursive process, like an iterative design process of trial and of testing, analyzing, and fixing, implementing the models themselves according to the way they were used. And here we come to the moment of the truth. I failed several times because I thought that my models were easy peasy and super clear to use. And I had to fix them 2 or 3 times each in order to make it more accessible to designers. And that was the first kind of failure I had. Then, since this is my moment of truth, after my first moment of truth, also designers failed in using them. But they were fine. The problem was that designers were not trained to use these sociological tools. So, what happened? Every time I asked them to collect the questionnaires and to read the data, and I discovered that I had to reread their data because they were not able really to structure them in a meaningful way and find the interconnection between the points and the nodes of significance between the data. So I spent a lot of time in training designers in order to be able to put the data into an Excel and make the Excel the right question in the right moment, and to look for significant patterns. What does it mean? That was the point of me failing in explaining the stuff, because it's not so easy to explain designers who doesn't have a background in sociology, for example, how to make statistics calculation, because that's not the field, but that's necessary to understand if our work is going on properly. Then, and it was with a questionnaire. With the rapid ethnography, it was funny and amazing because I split it up and it was developed with Judith, and we decided to use this for fields of investigation and to give some ideal question to the players and ask them to fill it. And what happened was that, okay, players said the designers should explain better how to play. That's a huge problem. Or there is a lot of fun, that is a positive thing to say. Then another thing was, oh, I love the way I interact with objects. Okay, fine. And I loved the story. But do you think it's normal to have someone running an ethnography, like the game designer, who is saying the player is playing wrong? What happened to me is that I provided the rapid ethnography model to designers, and they were blaming the players because they said, I did it right, I designed the game right, it's the player who is wrong. And you cannot imagine how hard it was to us designers to put themselves to the test, like maybe it's the game who has a little bug, or we can do something to fix it. And so the pro is, of course, that tools like that allows the ethnography. You are following your player like a stalker for a while, and you're really observing what is happening. But there is a little issue in that you see their faces, but they're not speaking with you. So you are making, again, an interpretation. And then we have a cons, that it means that you really have to be open to possibilities and to the fact that you can actually fail. I made a lot of questionnaires, and the main objective was to collect all the possible data that I could need during the process of validating a game, assessing a game. From general profiling, we were speaking about gender issues before. Okay, let's see the differences between data of male and female player, if something significant comes out. Or topic-specific profiling, like which is your starting point, which is your idea about the topic, which is the one at the end of a play, of a game experience. Let's make a confrontation about them. And then understand the way the metaphor, for example, is clear to the player and things like that. Okay, that was what has been collected according to the case study I presented to you. Keep the data safe. From it's a Likert scale. I'm sorry for the boring terminology that is coming out, but the Likert scale is going from 0 to 3, and these are the results. So, just to make things clearer, yay! It was fun. It was challenging. Indecision and anger were not so high, so it was great. Also, frustration and the sense of powerless were not high, but very low. Even boredom, even if it's kind of in a position of uprising. So that's great. It means it kind of worked, at least looking at the data. The problem happened with a black balloon, like confusion, a lot of confusion. The problem of that game was that rules were not explained in a very good way, but the designer denied that several times till they got the moment of truth with the player filling the questionnaires. Then satisfaction and surprise were expected to be higher, and this is another moment of truth, when you do see that they are just in the average. And is the average enough for a designer? Not really. So they had to go back to their game, but with some data in their hands and some elucubration, rumination in order to fix them. Something else was about how players, did they like the game? That's, and what part of it? They loved, for example, the interaction with the elements. Of course, there were the dices and you had to throw it, and sometimes the stickers on your face. That's nice, it makes sense. Then the task and the mission, you had to throw water against people. I mean, in hot summer, it's great. But also visual and graphics was fine. Look at the mechanics. The only comment I made when I went through the data was, holy shit, what happened? What happened on the mechanics? They were kind of the same and not explained in a very clear way. Again, back to the importance of explaining rules, and back to my students asking them, please take care of your player. The player is not stupid. You have to be clear when explaining stuff and put yourself into the shoes of the player. Just try to take some distance. So, they loved, for example, the custom and the objects. The tone of voice was perfect because it was quite silly and ironical. The interaction with objects and players was loved, but what emerged was a huge problem with the game rules that were not explained for real. Do something with the narrative in order to make it more accessible and clear, and please take care of the mechanics, add something in terms of variety. And I have to say that players did it, so well done. What is the pro of using a questionnaire like that? Of course, gathering data about the game in terms of usability, but also going beyond usability and understand the meaning making of it. How meanings has been translated. The cons are that you have to be able to read it and to interpret data in a proper way. Then another moment of truth was the questionnaire, the moment of interviews and focus group, when you finally got to speak to the player. And that's when things emerged for real, like that sometimes they were really focused on doing things that they had like this face, and they looked very bored or stuff like that, but they were actually immersed. And they were perceived as angry, but it was not real. They were not sad, not fed up, they were just focused. That's another issue of interpretation that happened during the rapid ethnography and required interviews in order to fix the data, the idea that the game designers had about what was happening. And they made it. At that point, I have to say that through this last part, the interviews and the chance to speak directly with the players, everything finally made sense. But it was a sum of a part, an holistic process. Sorry, I went... No, it's fine. So, just to conclude and make a short summary, yeah, games for social change and games that are meant to convey messages do ask for players for openness toward a topic. But they actually ask the designers who are designing them even more openness, because you have to be open-minded in order to grasp what's happening to your players during your playtest and your game sessions, and in order to understand if you are really succeeding in conveying what you expect and you want and you wish to convey. And then, don't be afraid. Failure is part of your life. We can fix stuff, but when it's the right moment of time. So playtests do exist for failing and fixing stuff, but you have to use that moment in the best way possible, like harnessing, exploiting the players, ask the players whatever you think it's important to you, of course in the right moment, in order not to corrupt data. But take care of your player and translate what is happening into your player and grasp as much as you can from the player, because that's the person who had the experience of your game. And that's the last 5 years of my life with a lot of things. And thanks. Sorry, I went 1 minute longer, I guess. Okay. Thank you, that was me.